Welcome. We're here with Jim Brown, who's a candidate for Cheyenne mayor. Jim, we're glad to have you here. And
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure to be back.
Thanks for agreeing to interview with the WT editorial board, and thanks for your interest in running for mayor. For those watching the video, I'm Brian Martin. I'm the managing editor here at the Tribune, and we have a couple of our community reps with us today.
I'm Sharon Fain with Black Hills Energy as a community representative.
Good seeing you again.
Bob Feck, Cheyenne Animal Shelter, community rep.
So Jim, let's start by just having you share with us what specific issues or concerns caused you to run for mayor.
Well, I think I've already mentioned this, and I kind of liked when I said it in my previous interview with the reporter, but I've been on the council, well, it'll be 10 years this year. And in those 10 years, I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly about City Hall. And believe me, there are good things, there are bad things, and they're just downright ugly things that go on that nobody ever sees, but you see behind the scenes. And, you know, keeping that in mind, I sat back and I really struggled the last couple of years whether I'd want to take the step for the mayoral. And as time came closer, I thought it would be a good idea. And a lot of that is at the urging of city staff, city employees. They've stepped forward. And that was probably the deciding factor on me stepping into the race. And the good things about the city, people really don't focus on as much as they do the bad things about the city, especially around election time. Other candidates, whether it be city council or mayor, they all focus on the bad things, how they're going to change the world. But the reality of it is there's very little mayor can do. His authority isn't what people think that it is, because you still have to work with the city council. You still have the people you answer to are the citizens of the city that give you that job. So I think to give you a true figure of why I want to be mayor is there's certain things that I see that could be cost saving to the city, certain things that I can see that would make the city run smoother and that would be a benefit to the city employees, and especially would be a benefit to the citizens of the city. Our city's growing exponentially. It's kind of unbelievable to me, the growth we've had over the last 4 or 5 years. So things need to change. We need to get into the new millennium, if you will. And back when I sat on the council or was first elected, and this was through the Spiker administration, he coined this term, the community of choice. I believed it then, and I believe it today. I think the community of choice has kind of fallen on the wayside. People have forgotten that we are a community of choice. I want to bring that community of choice back into the city and make us proud like we were 10 or 15 years ago. And I have to hand it to the Spiker administration and the council people at that time. They had a vision. They did very well with that. And that's kind of what made us what we have today.
Jim, what qualifications do you bring to the table that will help you serve as mayor?
I figured that would probably be a good question to ask. And I can tell you that, you know, I've been on the council now for 10 years. And in those 10 years, I was chairman of the Public Service Committee for 1 year. And in the last 9 years, I've been chairman of the Finance Committee. So I've been in direct involvement with management over there for the last 9 years, or at least 7 years, which really gives me a lot of insight on how our city runs, how the city works behind the scene that the public doesn't see, and even the employees don't see. There's a lot of meetings that take place. There's a lot of visiting with constituents that you don't know about, the county commissioners. On top of that, I have sat on, I'd have to refer to notes, at least 5 committees, standing committees. From the GIS, I've been chairman of the GIS committee for at least twice in those 7 years, ex officio of several other committees. So I think with my 10 years experience, my experience as Finance Committee Chairman, Public Service Committee Chairman, and sitting on the other boards that I've sat on for 10 years, I think that gives me a strong insight to what the mayor's job is truly like, truly entails, and what you can expect if you step into that office.
I have a follow-up to that, if you don't mind. You talked about your extensive experience with the city, and how do you put the communities, those who say that, you know, we don't want more of the same, how do you put their minds at ease? You know, you talk about change. how do you convey to them that those who may not have been satisfied with the last 8 years, what do you say to them?
You know, I would say to those people that don't want the same, a person that eventually has to put their mouth where or put their experience where their mouth is. And I'm not saying that there's going to be a great deal of change. I'm saying there's going to be steady growth and steady change in different direction that we've seen in the past 8 years. The mayor we have for the last 8 years, like him to death, Mr. Kaysen, we get along fine, but I think he and I have different management styles. And I think the management styles has probably got us to where some of the morale around City Hall and with citizens of the city differ. But, you know, for those people that might be watching this, I'll tell you that rest assured, I'm a decision maker. I don't take weeks or days or months to make a decision. I will weigh all of the facts that come to me on a decision. We'll make those decisions in a timely fashion. Will I be able to keep everybody happy? Absolutely not. Will I keep some people happy? I certainly hope so. But what I can tell you is that as your mayor, I will give you a different sense of direction than you've seen the last 8 years.
Mr. Brown, first a quick comment, because you've complimented Mayor Spiker on the community of choice in the council at that time. And I like to hear that. I would tell you that in 40 plus years, that's the best man I would ever work for in my life. But you also mentioned that you want to move the city forward. And we haven't talked about that negative too much. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing the city?
As of right now, the biggest challenge with the declining state revenue rolling into the cities, and that's not a maybe, that's a forgiven. I think the biggest challenge over the next 4 years is going to be maintaining a balanced budget, and still give the citizens of the city the services they become accustomed to. It's the job of a city to provide services. We're not there to make money. We're not there to sell anything. We're there to provide a service to our community and a service to our citizens. So balancing the budget in a fair, equitable way to keep the citizens accustomed to the service that they know is going to be the biggest challenge. The other challenge that I think needs to take place, and I've thought about this for several years, we need to have a new management structure within the upper tiers of the city. The structure we have right now has worked good for 40 plus years. You have your mayor, you have 10 department managers, then everything flows down. I think there's a more fluid way to manage the city. And I won't get into specifics at this time, but I certainly will if I make it through the primaries and especially if I become your mayor. But I really think, I think we've turned into a new century, but I don't think our management style has caught up to that. So one thing that I would really work on, and I would hope to see, that right now we have 10 department managers that are appointed by the mayor. I've questioned whether those department managers appointed by the mayor really at-will employees. I don't think so. I would like to remove those at-will employees or those appointed department managers. They'd still be appointed by state statute and ordinance. We have to appoint, or the mayor has to appoint as department manager. But that doesn't mean that they're at-will employees. That doesn't mean that they can be fired immediately. You know, I think if we get that mentality out of there, we could probably, our city engineer, we've gone through 4 of those in 8 years. I think if we get rid of the at-will thought of those appointed department managers, we'll be able to attract younger engineers that know they'd have a future with the city. Right now, it seems like the only one we really attract would be the ones that are semi-retired or retired that aren't really concerned about 2 years down the road. So I think the change would come in management of the city, and I think that would flow down morality through the whole city and give everybody a different view of how the city's run.
All right, a follow-up to one of the comments that you just made about the purpose of government is to provide services.
Correct.
There are essential government services.
There are.
And there are non-essential.
Correct.
Have you ranked those in your own mind?
I have. And when I rank them, I'm going to I can't say police over fire, it's police, fire, and sanitation. Those are my three critical areas of service to the citizens. They weigh on health, safety, and welfare. Sanitation, safety and welfare, and the health, police and fire, they're saying. Everything under that kind of flows somewhere else, but it's not critical. We give quality of life, parks and recreation, very important to attract people to your community. But they have to take second place to fire, police, and sanitation. So if it comes to a push up in the budget, I know there's probably some city employees just cringing at this, but you know, you're on the chopping block. But we would try not to do that. We'd make it painless as possible, if that even has to happen.
Any other challenges facing the city that you'd like to highlight?
Money's the most critical, I think, and this time of the year, the challenges, and it's kind of funny, like I already stated, when you're running for office in an election cycle, all you ever hear from the people who want to run are the bad things about the city. And so you challenge naturally the potholes, but you're going to have potholes. We had potholes 50 years ago, we're going to have potholes 50 years from now. I wish I could promise everybody our streets would be smooth as glass and the snow would be removed within an hour and there'll always be parking downtown. Our downtown core is probably a challenge that's going to be something that's been a challenge for the last 25 or 30 years, and it'll continue to be a challenge. There's no easy answer for our downtown. Parking is certainly one of the biggest challenges for creating or revitalizing our downtown. There's some good things happening down there, though. I actually feel very good about the Heinz building. I've been directly involved with that behind the scenes with several people. I think if that would come to fruition, you would start seeing a downtown more vibrant, and you'd start seeing the mom and pop shops down there start seeing some support that they've never seen before. So, you know, it's our downtown, it's our management, the way we manage our city and our monies, but they're all managed. I think they're all manageable because we're a community of choice. We have been, and we want to continue to be that.
So to turn things more toward the positive, what's your vision for Cheyenne, Jim? And can you describe maybe some things that Cheyenne doesn't have that you would like to see it have and that you might be able to facilitate as mayor?
First off, I've always thought that the mayor should be up here and he has a vision for the city and he conveys that vision to his department managers and they make it happen, or they bring him ideas to make it happen. And that's not real sure that's the way things are, or that's the way they've been for a long, long time. To give Cheyenne a more positive note, it would be nice if we had a recreation center. I agree it's a quality of life thing, but you have to, when you're sitting at this level, you have to understand that something of that magnitude, even if the people wanted it and they approved it on a 6-penny ballot, we have to then figure out how we're going to maintain that for the next 20 or 30 years through the general funds. And I think that's what a lot of people forget about. So quality of life issues, I think, would be great. We'll certainly explore those possibilities and see if they're viable. To make all of this happen, I think you would need to promote the 6-penny ballot more. I know there's some discussion now on a 7th penny. I'm glad that the legislature gives us that option. Whether we want to use it, what we want to use it for is some contention with me. The city just recently, we've identified $180 million worth of capital improvement projects the city needs, and they're prioritized, but we don't have funding for them. Everything from infrastructure, streets, I think recreational opportunities, the Belvoir Ranch, which it would be nice if we could develop the Belvoir Ranch. I think the Belvoir Ranch, it's owned by the city. I think there's another time for it, but it's not right now for various reasons. And I'll touch on that. Whether it would happen in my 4 years or not, I can't say, but the city does have a lease with an energy company for a wind farm out there. And they're in the middle of their EPA evaluation right now. And should that come to fruition and those wind farms start being built out there, that could be a revenue income to the city $2 million. And if that happened, that $2 million to me should flow right back into the billboard. That's what would make it pay for itself. And that's what would give us those recreational opportunities out there. But to try and squeeze that out of the general fund now, or even put it on a 6-penny ballot, doesn't make sense to me, because our priorities of 180 million or so, there's so many more things up there. And I wish I'd brought that list. I could talk more fluidly about them. But anyway, I see quality of life issues would make us better. Downtown would certainly be good, what everybody talks about downtown. So I guess my vision for the city is to at least maintain what we have without falling backwards during the tight budget times. And that happens, believe it or not, that happens, even though you don't think it's going to happen. Just because we don't have the money doesn't mean we stop and we stand still. We have to still move forward. We may not be able to move forward to the extent we'd like to, but there was a very smart man with a lot of money back in the 50s that did stop building his company, and he eventually went out of business, and that was Montgomery Ward. You know, he stashed all his money and he held it. And he spent from the 70s into the 80s trying to, well, he died, but the company tried to make up time, and eventually, I think in the early 90s, he went bankrupt. But we don't want that to happen in the city. We have to keep moving forward.
You talked about the management, the current management structure. I'd like to move to the management structure of the budget. That is sort of a tops down right now, where the mayor develops the budget and then he presents it to the council. Do you find that effective as a council member? Would you make a change on how that process takes place? Would you see it as more collaborative? What's your thought on developing the budget?
You know, this has been interesting, you know, in this budget cycle, especially because we've had some new people on the council want to kind of build it their way, the way the state builds theirs. We have such a small budget compared to the states or the federal budget. I think it works quite well. And the reason I think that it does, if you're truly a council person involved in the budget, want to be involved and know your job, you're involved in that budget every day. At the end of every month, within 3 days, the city treasurer sends out the month end for the previous month. So we see those numbers at the end of every month. We know every month where we're at in that budget, if we want to get involved in it, which I do. Some people don't look at it at all until it's budget time. And then they say, well, you never ask us, or why didn't we get involved? And I've argued that on the dais. You are involved every month. You know, your lack of enthusiasm should not be condemning city staff for the way they do business. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that is heard by everybody. So I think the budget process works quite well. If anything, I think the mayor could probably involve the department managers much sooner, get them involved 6 months earlier and say, hey, here's what we're anticipating. You show me your numbers. I'm not real sure that happens now. I'm not real sure that happened in the previous administration either. So I think I would get the department managers involved much quicker than has been in the past.
Are we on priorities of economic development?
Yeah, 6 would be good. Sure question.
How would you develop downtown? What would you do how do you spur economic development to occur?
Downtown's tough nut to crack. We're not the only city that goes through that. First, I want to say there's no blight in our downtown. To me, there's no blight. The definition of blight is if you have buildings falling apart, the facades are falling apart, the windows are broken, the rats are running out of the buildings. We don't have that. We have vacant buildings, but for the most part, they're relatively in good shape. We have a downtown development authority, and we have had for 30-some years. I've probably been one of their biggest argumentative people on the council for various reasons. I think the DDA, it's their job to figure out how to build downtown, and then they come to the council and ask for the funds to do that. But to me, that's never happened. We need to get more involved. The DDA needs to get more involved and do their job that they were put together to do, I think. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not real sure the director of the DDA we have today talks directly and gets involved with the DDA of the Children's Museum. Because if they did talk and they understood each other, I think we would have much better chance of making the Hines project come to fruition much quicker. That's unknown to many people, but it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. I think there needs to be better communication downtown. The one thing I think that's really started to kick off is Leeds has gotten more involved in our downtown, which they haven't in the past. They've kind of been out in the rural area doing their thing. The Chamber's got more involved. Visit Cheyenne's got more involved. And with all of those coming together, I think our chances of doing more downtown are better now than they ever have been. So to come up with a specific grocery store, whatever, I don't have that. I'm not real sure that's the city's job to come up with. I think we have an organization in place, a semi-quasi or quasi DDA organization that should be doing that.
How much does the planning and development process get in the way of that, Jim, in terms of there have been some changes made? Do you think those are enough changes? We're still hearing stories out in the community about people within the planning department who will approve projects, approve plans, and then when the project's done, they still come in and find something wrong and have to start over again. Do you see that problem, or you hear that happen?
First, we need to bring this into perspective. We have a planning department, we have a development department, and then we have a building department. The way the organization is set up now, and it was split recently, we have a planning department now, we have a development department, and then we have a building department. The developers I've talked to, and even downtown was recently developed within the last 5 years, planning department wasn't an issue. We didn't have a problem with them. They worked very well with us. The development department didn't have a problem with them. They worked well. We had problems. We talked it out. We worked it. Our problem was when the building department, which is the enforcement division of the planning and development department, our building department, they're the people that go out and see if you put it together right, the building inspectors, where we were running into problems. We'd have one building inspector go out and he would inspect something. Well, then next week they call for another inspection on something else. We get a different inspector. He'd go out and say, you can't do that. I'm shutting you down. You can't do it. Well, all of a sudden that shut the whole project down. So we had to, the developers had to pull people off. They sat still for 2 or 3 days while they went to City Hall trying to work this out. And that's where the problem was the building department, I think. Nothing against our building department, but part of, should I become mayor, we're going to have to sit down and have a long talk with our building department on how we don't have that anymore. And my initial thought was, if the inspector is out there on the electrical, then he needs to be the same inspector out there the next time, and the same on the building, and the same on the mechanical. Or if nothing else, they all need to be there at the same time somehow so they can get their heads together. We don't have these conflicts of interest. So to answer your question, I don't think we ever should have split the planning department. I don't think from the building department or the development department. What we should have done is taken a hard look at the building department at that time, and I think our problems would have been solved.
You had mentioned the 6 penny, and then the state gives you that option for the 7th penny. What's your philosophy on the use of taxpayer money for amenities like the Children's Museum?
I have an issue with that. I think the Children's Museum is a great opportunity for the city. I've expressed my views on the Children's Museum. I think it's at the wrong place. I don't know why you would put a children's museum 2 doors down from a bar within 100 feet of 2 hotels that house registered sex offenders. It doesn't make any sense to me. The 7th penny, I know it says economic development. Well, when you look at the Children's Museum, since you specifically mentioned that, the amount of economic development they would bring downtown, I think by their own numbers, they bring $326,000 in payroll to downtown. And when it's all said and done, it was going to be a net of $26,000 worth of revenue into the city. Well, if we do the Heinz building, that'll bring probably $3 to $3.5 million worth of payroll to the core downtown. And that doesn't count what the sales tax from spin-off of those people going to lunch or spending extra evenings downtown. So I think we need to concentrate our 7th penny on not so much economic development, unless we find something truly economic development that would really bring us in some large amounts of money. I think the Children's Museum, it was billed to us 5 years ago or 4 years ago. This will be privately funded. We'll never ask for tax dollars, but that's all changed because apparently the private funding isn't happening. So to answer your question, I don't think the 7th penny should be used for the Children's Museum. Perhaps if we had a massive chance to redevelop downtown that would bring its exponential amount of tax revenue into the city, then I would think differently.
Do you feel the same way about the 6th penny? The 6th penny shouldn't be used for the Children's Museum or those kind of projects either?
You know, that's my personal feeling. The nice thing about cities and governments, we don't tax people. People tax themselves, you know, and the government tax the people. The nice thing about the 6th and 7th penny is the people that are going to be paying that, they get to vote on whether they want to tax themselves. The 6th penny, I like just the way it is. It's for specific projects. I think the recreation center was out once. The people several times have said they really aren't interested in that. They'd rather spend it on other things. So we just have to let the people, we're in the middle of that now, and we're trying to come up with a list, a priority list of the city on what we want to see on that. And it's an interesting list, but unfortunately we can't put everything on there. It's kind of bound by this. The commissioners get to tell us how much money we put on there. Typically, I think the city's going to get about $45 million. How much of that? None of that, I don't think, is really considered economic development.
What are your priorities, speaking of? It's one of our questions. What are your priorities for the 6th penny?
I think my top priority was actually, it was Christensen Road. I'd like to see it on the 6th penny, which is out there by the Lowe's distribution center up over and connect to Pershing Boulevard. And I say that not because it's in Ward 3, but we need that anchor out there. I can't remember the number of employees out there now. I think there's like over 4,000 employees in that area just off that. We still have fire response time there that's relatively good out of Station 3, but it's only one way down College and then down past Walmart. We need to open up that other south end or that east end of that area out there to get us back into Pershing. It would really help with the commute time from the people. And if we did Christensen Road, it would actually start a loop around our city from the east. That would just be the first leg. So that was my first priority. I wish I could have brought my list on the other one.
As far as your personal priorities, though, I mean, I know you're working with the city and developing a city list, but what are Jim Brown's priorities for 6th penny?
For the 6th penny, I would like to see more of the 6th penny just go to streets. Personally, when I drive through our streets, you know, we have the 5th penny for that, but we do what we can with the 5th penny, and there's not enough 5th penny to go on the streets. I would like to see the 6th penny. We have so many pockets in the city that are still gravel. I would like to see a 6th penny ballot that would take care and let us pave those gravel streets within the city. And I've had some pushback on that from different people saying, hey, you know, I live in the county. I'm not going to spend 1 penny paving a city street. But you know, how do you ever get your city to grow? How do you ever clean it up if you have a mentality like that? So personally, I would like to see our city streets use the 6th penny use the 6th penny for more major street projects. And you get into the 5th penny, I might just mention that we do about $6 to $7 million a year in 5th penny projects. And that money is earmarked for 4th Street projects. And the reason we do that, we only have a limited construction period in the city of Cheyenne. So if we try and do more than that, we really run into headaches and problems, especially when we have to shut down for a couple of weeks of Frontier Days. I think the biggest road construction projects we had in my years on the council was when we did the roundabout. It was like a $15 million summer. Boy, if it wasn't a booger to get around. And that all happened accidentally because the roundabout got pushed back a year because of legal questions with property owners. But so 6th penny, we need more money for the street projects and to rebuild our streets, some of our major arterials and collectors. That's my personal view.
There are some funds, city funds, that go to nonprofits.
There are.
And there's a contract with the United Way for them to administer the distribution of those funds. You support that process and those funds, or do you?
No, I don't have a problem with it at all. I've supported it every year since I've been on the council. I think United Way is very important. I think the way they distribute their fund, I leave it up to them. You know, we as a governing body, we as a community should support United Way and the nonprofits. It's kind of a no-brainer with me. I've never argued against it.
Do you happen to know the amount that the city
I
gives
don't.
right now? It was started out around $1 million, didn't it?
See, that's off the fifth penny.
That was fifth.
See, so we take a certain amount of fifth penny. I think 82% of that goes to roads and streets. And then the remainder is split up between fire, PD, and the nonprofits, but I don't know. I wish I did. I should have had a heads up. You should have given me some questions yesterday. I haven't done well.
I would follow up with that that is the process. And then there's been some overage.
There are.
That then also, I believe it's the mayor's discretion as to how to distribute that overage.
I'm not sure, Bob, I can't answer that directly, whether he has the discretion to distribute that any way he wants. I thought it came to us under a resolution or something, but
It does.
okay.
It does, but generally what he's done in the past is distributed by that formula.
Oh, the same formula, yeah. I guess if I was mayor, I'd take a hard look at it. I'm not versed enough in that question to give you a reliable answer. But I can give you an answer, I just don't know if I'd like it. Sounds like a politician does.
Jim, you touched some on the budget priorities, and I want you to touch a little more on that, as well as saving priorities. We're having this conversation the day after the council voted to take money out of reserves.
Correct.
For across the board salary or pay increases for city staff. Do you support that? What do you think the right amount in reserves is, and how should that money be used?
Well, our reserves today are looking very well. But that doesn't mean they're going to look real well a year from now or 2 years. We don't know if we're going to get any money from the state next year. So we have to be very careful with the money we take out of reserves. I actually made the motion last night to remove the $312,000 to give the non-uniformed employees 2.5% pay increase. And I felt obligated to do that in light of the fact that PD was going to get a 2.5% pay increase, regardless of how the money came down or how that ended up that way. So,
Before you leave that though, how do you maintain that? That's what this newspaper's argued against for years, is using one-time money for recurring expenses. So you've given all these employees a raise. How do you then fold that into the budget and continue to?
okay, the same statement I made last night, Brian. I said, I feel comfortable doing this because it's like anything else in a budget. If it's incorporated in the budget today, you're going to make it work. It's going to be there next year. You're going to make it work. City staff may have to say, okay, instead of X number of dollars on this line that I had to spend, we're going to drop that down to this line. They're going to be the people that makes it work, not the mayor. The mayor's going to tell them, here's your number. You guys make it work. And I think that's what a mayor should be doing. He shouldn't be micromanaging each line. So that argument sounds good in theory, but I think my argument makes more sense because they're bound to that. They wanted a raise. They got a raise. They need to show us that we can sustain that. I think that'll happen during each budget cycle. It just does. It's just like in private practice. I have a business, and there's been times it's killed me, and I can't afford to do that. But you do it because the most important asset of any organization is its employees. It's not the paint, it's not the lights, it's the employees that make it happen every day. So you have to take care of them within reason. And I think that was probably one of the driving ideas is why I made that motion last night. Plus it would have been, I'd be kicking myself forever if PD would get a 2.5 and the rest of the city employees. Because I do agree with what Jason Sanchez said. All employees are equal. The police, there's some, you were a policeman for years, they're more important because they put their life on the line. Well, they're there by choice. You know, they made that choice in their life, so it's not like anybody forced them. So, you know, from the sanitation worker to the parks worker to the police to the fire, they're all equal in my eyes, and they should be treated equally.
So what's the right amount of city reserves then, and how do you think, is it possible to build it in a lean budget cycle?
Anything's possible, whether it really works or not.
Is it-
That's the question.
Is it a priority for you to do that?
Well, there is. I think 2 or 3 years ago, we passed a resolution stating that we had to have, I think, 90 days worth of budget reserves. And we're beyond that now. We're actually setting very well. And if those reserves drop below that set, then the mayor needed to draft and send out a report to the council how he's going to bring that back up to that 90-day reserve, which makes no sense to me at all, because the mayor can't spend a penny unless the council approves it. So if the council approves him overspending the budget, they're putting it on his shoulders to tell him how they're going to fix that because they overspent it. But you know, it's government. But I really think that we'll be able to maintain that, our 90 days. And if we do drop down, for the longest years during the Spiker administration, we only had like a 35 to 45 day reserve, and we did well. You know, but I feel better with the 90-day, and I might be wrong, and it might be a 60-day reserve. Numbers all flow together after a while, but I think it's a 60-day reserve we currently have. We moved that from 45 to 60.
So since we started talking about last night's meeting, I think it was second reading for the annexation.
For
the Loomis.
Oh, for the, what we call the sweet grass, or what's, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So we've got we ran a sewer line all the way out to Love's several years ago, and now
Correct.
we're gonna take in this chunk. We're slowly starting to surround the South Cheyenne sewer water
Mhm.
system. Do you believe that in your term as mayor that could become a annexation?
Well, I believe I would like for it to be, but I don't think it'll ever happen. I think the South Cheyenne Water and Sewer District, you know, what they do out there for people, that all started back in the 60s, and it's worked very well for folks out in the south part of the city. And it continues to work well today. They buy their water from the city. They use our reclamation plant. There was a discussion 2 or 3 years ago to do a test case for an annexation just south of the city. I'm not going to go into details, but that fell by the wayside for legal reasons. I think if we try and annex, and it's possible, I think the legal ramifications to the city, which would cost us a ton of money, could really tie into our reserves and our amount of expenditures that we would have. I would like to see it annexed. I would probably maybe try one test case to see how that works in the courts, but to bring that whole thing in real quick, it wouldn't be possible, because you bring that much in, we wouldn't have the police source to cover that. I don't know how many acres or how many thousands of people that is. We wouldn't have, fire might not be too bad because we do have a station in that area, but city resources, just the snow plows, the sanitation, that all has to happen over a period of time. So I could see bringing in small chunks of it, but I would rather those people out there ask us to be brought in than we force the annexation. In all of the years, I don't think the city has ever forced an annexation. We've annexed what people have asked us to become part of the city. And once they ask us, we're obligated to take care of them. That answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
I would tell you, we were real close to forcing it with Leo Pando as mayor. It went to a 5-5 vote.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, I was still learning how to tie my shoes back then, so I'm out of the loop on that one. I'm not quite that young. So.
Jim, can you talk to us about the proposed anti-discrimination ordinance and your feeling on whether it's something that's needed?
You know, I'm not a fan of an anti-discrimination ordinance. I think something like that needs to be handled at the federal level and the state level, and the city follows whatever rulings they have. It just seems inappropriate for a city to have that. I know Laramie does. I'm not sure. They have a different group of people over there. It's a college town, a lot younger voters. But for the city to have an anti-discrimination ordinance, I'm not sure if we would want a mayor or a municipal judge making a call on something like That's my biggest problem with it. If the city, if somebody wants to draft a resolution stating that the city, complies with all of the regulations federally at the state level against discrimination, I'd be more than happy to support that. I think that's as far as we need to go at the city level. And then the other thing about the ordinance, show me what's wrong. Nobody's ever stepped forward and say this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. So without something to go on, just to be throwing an ordinance out there, it does not make sense to me.
And one thing I don't think you've touched on so far is the landfill expansion and development. You've mentioned Belvoir briefly, but now we're focused on expanding the current
Correct.
landfill, and it looks like DEQ is going to go along with
Correct.
that. Eventually, that'll run out. But what are your thoughts about? Are we okay now? We definitely don't want to send trash to Colorado anymore, so let's get this going. And where do we go from here with that?
As far as the landfill, if DEQ does the permitting, which I think, then we have to come up with the money too. And I think at one time, 4 years ago on the 6 penny, I argued on the dais that I'd like to see the landfill on the 6 pennies so we could pay cash for that. I think it was like $12 or $15 million. We could collect that, we could pay trash for that and be done with it. There was some pushback from staff and other council members saying, wait a minute, this is a city landfill. County people don't want to help pay for a city landfill. Didn't make sense to me, but obviously I lost on that. So I think the thing right now is for us to permit the landfill and expand it, we're probably going to have to go to revenue bonding. And we can do that because we'll pay for the revenue bonds off the sanitation fee that we charge the citizens. So I think that's probably the direction we're going to go, though I don't know that for sure. And supposedly, from what I understand, if we expand it to the plans today, we're good for the next 30 years out there. And in those 30 years, I think that'll give us more time, or the city more time, to look at the Belvoir once again for sanitation. I think the initial concept of putting the landfill out there was very well received by staff, and it made sense at the time. But it's like anything else. There was a short window to buy that piece of property. I'm not sure all of the due diligence was done as great as it could have been at that time. But I think with more time to do due diligence for landfill at the Belvoir, I really think it's probably a very good possibility. 50 years or 60 years or 100 years down the road, we could use that property out there. After all, it's 17,000 acres, and the landfill would cover a very small portion of that. So, yeah.
To follow up on something you just said, do you think then there wasn't proper due diligence and that the city never should have bought Belvoir?
No.
Was it a bad investment, or will it turn out to be a good one?
I think it's going to be a very good one. You have to understand the city only paid $2.5 million for its share of the Belvoir. BOPU paid the other we paid like $5.1 million for the Belvoir. In that time, BOPU has drilled several wells out there, which the intention is to use that for city water. I'm not sure they're using any of it at the moment. They're still getting through the EPA portions of contamination out there, which is all very manageable. It's not like we can't use the water. So it was well spent for the resources underneath the ground. And I really think when you look at the potential recreational opportunities out there, it was well spent for the city. But just because you bought it doesn't mean it needs to flourish and come to fruition quickly. There's land owned by cities for hundreds of years that have still not been developed, but it's good that the city owns that. Now, I think the city was very wise in buying that Belvoir Ranch.
And you mentioned the wind farm obviously has
Correct.
revenue potential, and to reiterate, you said you would wait until that gets going before using that money then to develop. It seems like the people who want Belvoir developed right away want those recreational opportunities. They want to be able to drive from Wyoming through that land that the city owns to the big hole and recreate right away. But you're saying that's not a priority.
I'm saying that it's just not possible at this time with the funds that we have available. I wish we could. I wish I could snap my fingers as mayor or even as a councilman and say, bam, there you go. You have your road. You're at the big hole. There's a lake out there. Go boating. There's plenty of bike trails, but it's just not possible. You have to deal with reality. And I think when you're a citizen looking at a very small picture of the city, everything's possible. Let me put it this way. A city's like a big machine. You're standing there watching it work, and boy, it's a flawless machine. It's working great. Don't have any complaints. This one could do a little better. That side could do. But inside that machine, there's a lot of little integral parts that need to work. And if you don't understand those integral parts, then you don't understand what that machine's doing to give you what you've got. And those parts need to be arranged. They need to be replaced. They need to be looked at from time to time. And I think with the new management structure that I had envisioned, some of those parts will be replaced and that machine will run smoother. And part of that could end up rolling over into the Belvoir. I think one budget cycle ago or 2 years ago, one of the new councilmen talked the council into putting $100,000 into an account to start the Belvoir thing. That's like saying I'm going to build a new house and I got $5 in the savings account. It was such a maker thing to say, or a bigger amount of money to put into that. It's just not there. So, let's save that money. Let's wait till we can do it right. And I think those days are coming.
Any other questions, follow-ups from the board? Okay. Jim, any other issues we didn't cover or anything you'd like to
Been a short hour.
Clarify.
clarify? Anything else?
Yeah, no, I guess to close out, I think when I look at my tenure on the council and what I've offered over the last 10 years, one thing, I'm vocal. And there's not been a vote won on that council where I haven't explained my vote. And I think we as elected officials need to explain our vote. We shouldn't just sit up there and vote yes or no without explanation. That's not doing justice to the people who put it in office. And I've done that consistently for the last 10 years. I've probably been one of the more vocal ones. And the thing that was told to me years ago by a very smart fellow is, if you're honest, you believe in what you're saying, and you tell the truth, the people they're going to take care of you, and they're going to appreciate that. And I've tried to do that for 10 years. I look at 9 other candidates running, and everybody has the opportunity to run, and that's the way our system's built. But my personal feeling after sitting there for 10 years, I don't see how anybody can be qualified to run for mayor unless they've sat on that council for at least one term, just so they can see what it's really like. I don't think any of the other 9 have a clue what's waiting for them on the other side. And just to drive that home, I talked to the current mayor just a week ago, caught him in the hall, and I said, Rick, tell me, if you had to do it over again, would you have preferred to sit on the council at least one term before you did mayor? He said, yeah, it would have made my life a lot easier. Just because you're mayor doesn't mean you have authority. You have to work with 9 other people. You have to work with 10 department managers, and you have to get along with all of them. So I guess that's what I bring to the table that I'm not real sure people understand. And I guess we'll just wait and see what happens. But I didn't run for office hoping to lose. I certainly hope I'm the finisher, but we'll let the people decide.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here, and appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation, and perhaps we'll see you in the future.